Hello, and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and today we're taking a look at my team selection and transfer plans for Game Week 9. So all my assets have come through the international fixtures unscathed. This is why I've left the video a little bit later in the week. This will be the only video this week. The last video before the deadline anyway. So the Colombia versus Ecuador match has just finished. I had Luis Diaz playing in that match, and so I wanted to wait until everyone had made it through to ensure that I wasn't forced into any transfers. And we've actually gotten extremely lucky, so we can progress forward with the plans that I had written down for this video. So before we get started, if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And if you do enjoy the following content or get anything out of it, hit that like button. Right, so first of all, I got to give a huge shout out to Alan Jones, who commented in the video last week pointing out that Diaby drifts in and out of games and is a pass first, shoot second type player. So I mentioned in my video last week that I was looking at Mbeumo out for Diaby, as I'm kind of getting over having Mbeumo in my squad, as he doesn't look at all like the player that he was at the start of the season. And Alan commented in the video saying that he has watched quite a bit of Aston Villa and had pointed out something that I hadn't heard from any other content creators. So I had the Wolves versus Aston Villa game on my watch list to review Diaby and Watkins before game week 10. And I have to say, I'm 100% in agreement with Alan. So when Diaby seems to receive the ball, specifically out wide, he uses the first touch to clear his feet and then immediately looks up to try and play a cross into the box. And he did this time and time again throughout that fixture. So not once did he try to take on his man to generate a shooting chance for himself, nor did he try to make a short pass followed by a darting dynamic run in behind the lines to try and receive the ball back in like a 1-2 movement type play to get himself into a good goal scoring position. He was basically always only ever looking for a pass, and it was quite often a cross into the box. Now, this will obviously show up in his expected stats, as sending a ball into the box can result in, a good goal scoring opportunity, or not a good goal scoring opportunity, but a goal scoring opportunity nonetheless. And if you do that enough times, your expected stats will creep up and you will start to come to the top of those lists. But that is a far cry away from saying playing a ball on the floor to someone else and then receiving the ball back and putting someone else in where he's got a first time shot, the ball isn't bouncing, the ball isn't in the air, and it's just a much better goal scoring opportunity. So this is where the expected stats can mislead people, and the only reason that Diaby was on my list was because he was at the top of these, up near the top of these expected charts. So I do use expected stats as a tool in FPL, but I do not at all use it to make decisions. I use it as a scouting tool to go, right, who is in amongst it, who's getting amongst the chances or creations within games. These are the players that I need to scout. I need to go and watch them play football and see whether or not the expected stats is telling the truth or telling lies, because expected stats are actually highly inaccurate. And so you always have to go in and actually watch the football. So in reviewing the game against Aston Villa, there were some other the Aston Villa versus Wolves game, there were some other things that I picked up that, do not look extremely good in terms of consistent attack from the Aston Villa squad. They're actually really poor in transition from defence into attack. So when Aston Villa are defending, they actually play with 6 men across the back line, with a 4-man box sitting in front that consists of both Watkins and Diaby as the front 2 in the box, so they are the furthest forward. But it actually requires quite a lot of defensive work in terms of maintaining shape and cutting off angles and moving from side to side that I don't think Diaby likes doing at all. He seems to do the the jog that doesn't have too much effort into getting into the position quickly, which is probably what the rest of the team need from him. But he's just kind of doing the, he's showing that he is getting into position, but not really looking like he's enjoying it too much at all. That doesn't really detract from Diaby's prospects at all, but with having 6 men as just a line across the back and then only 4 men in front, in the centre of the park, in a box, actually makes it really hard for Aston Villa when they earn the ball back off whoever they're playing to actually come out of that shape and back into a more or a much more expansive shape where there is a lot of options, there's a lot more triangles available to play with, and they quite often find it a little bit tricky to transition from defense into attack. That's just something I thought I should point out as something to consider when you are looking at Aston Villa assets, just basically on the whole. So back onto Diaby, he's actually only made 90 minutes on the pitch twice so far this season in 8 game weeks, and has had substitutions at the 61, 63, 72 and 78 minutes in 4 of those 8 game weeks so far this season. So he's not a rotation prone player, but he is definitely a minutes risk. He's starting all the games, but he's not quite making it to that 90-minute mark. And when he did get subbed, I think he actually got subbed quite early. I think there was a 61-minute mark where he actually got subbed off. Yeah, so in the Wolves match, where I actually watched the full 90 of Aston Villa, it's the second or third time I've watched the full 90 for Aston Villa. He was subbed off at the 61-minute mark, and I wasn't at all surprised to see him come off, as he wasn't really having any sort of effect on the game. He was kind of moving about in position, but didn't really have much impact on the game at all. So, as a result of all this, I've actually gone completely cold on Diaby, and I won't be buying him at all unless I see him start to actually attack the goal and try to get in and amongst it himself, as opposed to just trying to send a ball into the box. And I think the second best attacker in the Aston Villa team, so obviously Watkins is their best attacker, the second best man in that team is Matty Cash, an out of position defender. So for all of you out here that don't actually currently own Matty Cash, he's actually probably the second best option in the team, and he's actually listed as a defender in the game. So thanks a lot for pointing that out, Alan. I'd also encourage everyone else to check back in on the videos, because we do actually get quite a lot of comments and a lot of conversation going on in the comments section, and there's actually quite a lot of information being put forward by some intelligent managers with some tactical insights that might add a new edge to your game. So Diaby is not going to be happening at all. I probably should have actually started this whole thing out by reading out my team, for those of you without the visuals. But I've actually got a full 11 players all playing at home this week. I've got Turner in net at home to Luton, Udogie at home to Fulham, Cash at home to West Ham, Burn at home to Crystal Palace, And Mbuemo will be his last match for me in game week 9 at home to Burnley. Obviously that Burnley fixture is looking pretty good for Brentford. I've got Maddison and Son at home to Fulham, and Luis Diaz, who was my new purchase in game week 8, and Salah from Liverpool at home to Everton as my 5-man midfield. And I have Julian Alvarez and Haaland up front at home to Brighton. Bench of Johnston, Kabore, Baldock and Woodrow. So my current plans is to do nothing in game week 9. I have one free transfer and 1.1 million in the bank, which was, I had Saka last week. I sold Saka for game week 8. Excuse me. And my plans were to just sell Saka down to Luis Diaz, hold on to that 1.1 million, not spend it, and then I would have the exact funds to go from Luis Diaz back up to Saka when he is fit and ready. However, in game week 10 we actually do have a pretty big decision to make, and it is Watkins versus Saka. So if I am to buy Saka back, I said in last week's video that I definitely will not be buying him in game week 9 because Saka has had a bit of an injury that he's been dealing with for the last few game weeks, and it actually reached the point where he got subbed off after only 30 minutes of the Champions League fixture, in which Arsenal ended up losing, and then that was the midweek fixture, and then it also held him out of the game versus Man City in game week 8, showing that this injury is actually severe enough to keep him out of 2 very crucial matches. And so I will not be buying Saka back in game week 9 because I would like to see him play a full 90 minutes and not hobble off the pitch at the end. And even if he does hobble off the pitch, that will not necessarily stop me from buying him in game week 10 if I do in fact end up going for Saka over Watkins. So Watkins in game week 10. So in the video last week, I think I was looking at the prospects of bringing in Watkins for game week 10 as he's got a very kind fixture against Luton. And at that point in time, I did have enough money to go from Julian Alvarez straight up to an 8 million Watkins with just one transfer. And I was looking at the prospect of game week 10, buying Watkins just with one free transfer. So roll this week, have 2 next week, spend 1 on going Julian Alvarez up to Watkins to block that Luton fixture. And then in game week 11, look to bring Saka back in by using 2 transfers to get Watkins out again, because he is the 8 million price point, which I would like to switch back into midfield in order to bring Saka back into my team. But as it so happens, Watkins has now risen from that 8 million price point up to 8.2 million, meaning that I cannot buy him with just one transfer, which does change my strategy quite significantly, because that extra transfer is actually quite a big difference. So if we have a look at the 3 fixtures from game week 10, so this is my own personal fixture ticker that I have built. For those of you who aren't aware, it's a little bit different to a lot of other fixture tickers that you will see out there. It has an extended view, so you can order by a set number of game weeks but still see all the other game weeks past that point. At the moment it's just sorted by 8 game weeks. We're going to start it at game week 10 and just go for the top 3 for the next 3 game weeks. And what we're really looking at here is Watkins versus Saka. So as you can see, Aston Villa currently top of the fixture ticker with Luton at home, Forest away, and then Fulham at home, so second top behind Brighton, with Arsenal coming in second, with Sheffield United at home, Newcastle away in game week 11, and then Burnley at home in game week 12. Now if we look at these immediate 3 fixtures, I would probably edge the fixture difficulty to Arsenal to Aston Villa, because Arsenal have to play Newcastle away in game week 11. But Arsenal have a much more consistent attack than Aston Villa, and as I've just said, Aston Villa are actually struggling going from defence into attack. Now, I don't think they're going to struggle at all in any of these fixtures, because Luton, Forest and Fulham are very, very good fixtures for Aston Villa, and I don't suspect they will get caught in transition too often. But Arsenal are an extremely good attacking team, and so I think, as a straight up comparison between the two, I think Saka can match Watkins across these three fixtures, because it's really only that game in game week 11 where Watkins is away to Forest and Saka is away to Newcastle that is kind of splitting the two. Now, fixtures favour Villa, but the attack favours Arsenal. However, if we have a look at the extended run of fixtures, and this is why I mentioned the fixture ticker here is only sorted by these 3 game weeks, but you can see the extended run of fixtures. Aston Villa in game week 13 go Tottenham away, Bournemouth away, Man City at home, and Arsenal at home in the next 4, compared to Saka of Brentford away, Wolves at home, Luton away, and then Aston Villa away. The extended run of fixtures for Saka is much better, and I would want to be jumping back on Saka probably in game week 12 or 13 anyway, if I did in fact buy Watkins. And so if I did go for Watkins in game week 10, I would still need 2 transfers, either in game week 12 or 13 or somewhere around there, to move those funds from Watkins back down to another striker in order to be able to bring Saka back into my midfield. And the reason that I need to do this and to use the 2 transfers is I have absolutely no plans of selling Son or Maddison in order to bring Saka back into my squad. So, the question I asked myself here was, is it worth using 1 transfer to upgrade Alvarez to Watkins, maybe 2 transfers if price changes occur, which they now have in fact occurred, and then another 2 transfers in 3 weeks' time to switch those funds back into Saka? So that's at least 3 transfers, maybe even 4. Well, it's not a maybe even now. It isn't a maybe 4 now. It is going to be 4 transfers if I want to go with Watkins. So do I want to use all 4 of those transfers just to be able to play Watkins away to Forest in game week 11 in order to miss Saka having to go away to Newcastle in the same week? Now, 4 transfers is a lot of transfers just to avoid that fixture for Saka away to Newcastle, in which, yes, it is a hard game, and Watkins does have a really good game away to Nottingham Forest. But is that 1 game week really going to be worth the entire 4 transfers over this run of fixtures? Even at 3 transfers, so if I could just buy Watkins without using true transfers this week, just to block this Luton fixture, I'm still not sold. I still don't think that is going, like, it's actually going to be worth it. Now, obviously, I could get this completely wrong here. I mean, Watkins against Luton at home could get a hat-trick. Saka at home to Sheffield United could still also get a hat-trick here. So I think Saka can match, or easily match, or even exceed Watkins in game weeks 10 and 12. So we're just missing out this game week 11 fixture here. So if Saka can at least match Watkins over game weeks 10, 11 and 12, and I go for Saka straight away, I'll actually have an additional 2 transfers up my sleeve as I won't need to move the money from Watkins back into midfield in order to buy Saka, who I am 100% getting back into my team. I am not going without Saka. He is one of the top 4 players in the game, and I will be bringing him back into my squad. So I definitely know that I will be buying Saka and would need to use those 2 transfers in order to pull it out of Watkins and put it into the midfield. Now there is a considerable risk here, and that is of course Saka's fitness. As I said, he's been dealing with an injury for weeks now, and it has kept him out of some pretty crucial games. But if Saka looks fit and healthy in game week 9, where they play Chelsea, where's Arsenal? Yeah, where they're away to Chelsea, so I'll be keeping a very close eye on Saka. But let's say he looks like he's recovered across the international break. He makes it to like 75, 80 minutes and doesn't hobble off the pitch. Then I think it's just straight. I'm going to be bringing Saka into my squad for game week 10, and that'll be that. However, if let's say Saka misses this Chelsea game in game week 9 and Arteta gives us absolutely no information about this or why he's missed the match, then we will have to come back in game week 10 to reassess with whatever new information we can learn before game week 10's deadline. So if Saka's fit and ready, he's coming back in. If not, we will have to reassess next week. So assuming that he is fit and ready, how do we actually fit Saka into this team? So I have 1.1 million in the bank. I could go Luis Diaz basically straight back up to Saka. Saka's currently at 8.6 million. He is scheduled to drop to 8.5 million. Might have already happened today as I've been recording, or it might happen tomorrow. He is very close to a drop, and so with the 1.1 million in the bank, I can go from Luis Diaz straight back to Saka. But Luis Diaz has Everton at home, Forest at home, and Luton away in the next 3 fixtures, and I do not really want to sell Luis Diaz because he is looking like a very good differential to have in my squad, and so I am aiming to hold on to Luis Diaz, Son, Maddison and Salah, and I'm looking to upgrade Mbeumo all the way up to Saka. Now that requires, with Saka being priced at 8.6 million, 0.9 million to come out of this squad somewhere with just 1 transfer to pull out the 0.9 million to be able to go from Mbeumo all the way up to Saka. And the only player that I can really do this with is Julian Alvarez. Because, Udogie, cash, I'm not selling Haaland. Udogie and cash, I would have to go from a 4.9 million all the way down to a 4 million. That's not happening. Burn's too cheap. Obviously can't take it out of my keepers. I could do it across a whole bunch of transfers and a whole bunch of downgrades, but I don't think it's worth it. So Alvarez is basically the only make way in order to get Saka back into the squad. Now, I'm not selling Alvarez because I think he's become a bad asset. I actually think he's got a very good chance of doing well in that Manchester United fixture in game week 10, as I think United are on track to get absolutely battered by City in that fixture, and Alvarez could definitely come away with a monster haul in that game. Maybe not a monster haul, but he could haul in that game. I think Haaland will probably do very well in game week 10. However, Alvarez was pulled off at the 67 mark in the Arsenal fixture last week, which is actually a slight worry, as the game was at 0-0 when he was subbed. And in my eyes, I actually thought that Alvarez was the second best goal scorer in that City team, and Pep took him off at the 67-minute mark. So clearly Pep wanted to give Doku, who was the man who came on for Alvarez, the final 30 minutes in that crucial Arsenal fixture in order to try and help win the game for them. Now, I would have put money on Alvarez staying on the pitch to try help City win that game, and so I am a little bit concerned about that. This is not the reason that I'm selling him. It might actually be nothing, but it is definitely something worth pointing out. We could see Alvarez start to rotate or even get benched moving forward, but it is something to keep an eye on. So, this means that going from Julian Alvarez, who I brought in for a hit a few weeks ago in order to catch some price rises, I think my sale value on him is 6.9 million. Yeah, so my sale value is 6.9 million. That means that I actually need to sell him all the way down to a 6 million asset or a 6.1 million asset if Saka does in fact drop to 8.5 million, which he does look on schedule to do. So, I'm not going to buy Morris from Luton or an Edouard, as both teams are very poor in attack. So that's Edouard from Crystal Palace. Wiss's fixtures at Brentford are poor, and he doesn't really excite me. And so that really only leaves two options up front in that slot, and both options are rotation-prone players, and those players are Nketiah and Pedro. Now, I owned João Pedro at the start of the season for the first 5 game weeks, and I was aware that he was going to be a rotation risk, especially in that Brighton team who are rotating quite heavily. So I do have a little bit of experience owning Pedro. Nketiah I see Nketiah as more of a fill-in player for Arsenal rather than actually being in contention for a starting spot if a full-strength Arsenal squad is available. Whereas Pedro is Brighton's new expensive asset that's trying to work his way into that starting 11 with a heavily rotating Brighton, but he has penalties. Now, considering I'm actually upgrading Mbeumo, I'm actually moving that 6.5 million price point out of midfield and into attack. So I should actually also compare my top choice of Pedro to the other 6.5 million assets in midfield, as I could just as easily have Watkins plus a 6.5 million midfielder and go without Saka, right? So I've already ruled out Diaby at the start of this video. I think Mbeumo is actually still a better asset than Diaby, but I still think a rotating Pedro for a very attacking Brighton team with a really kind set of fixtures is still a better asset than Mbeumo. Ward-Prowse at West Ham does have all the set pieces but isn't on penalties and plays for a less attacking team than Brighton. It's actually very close between Pedro and Ward-Prowse. The Newcastle lads of Almiron, who is a rotation risk, and Gordon, who is a minutes risk, are players that I am seeing in a lot of wildcard teams as the cheap midfielder asset in order to fit in the more expensive options around them, and I still think Pedro is just as good, if not better, than the Newcastle lads. Hwang Hee-chan plays in a team that very rarely scores more than 2 goals in any match, and so it'll be quite hard for him to consistently score points or come away with any sort of haul. Cole Palmer is an interesting option at Chelsea, but his fixtures are terrible. Excuse me. However, Palmer is also on penalties, and if he gets a successive run of starts, he could be a very close competitor to Pedro, but Chelsea are struggling in attack and have been for a while, whereas Brighton have actually been generating some pretty good, decent attack throughout the whole of the first 8 game weeks of the season. And so the only other option really is someone like a Matoma at Brighton. who looks to be about the most nailed on for starts in that Brighton squad, but even he gets the odd rotation. He's also currently flagged with fatigue at the moment, and so De Zerbi has been rotating the Brighton squad very heavily throughout the whole season, and he did so very heavily at the end of last season as well, when Brighton went into a very heavy fixture congestion. And when that happened, Mitoma did get a few benchings over a successive run of games within a short span of time. And so there is every chance that Mitoma is just as big of a risk of rotation as someone like João Pedro, whereas João Pedro actually also comes with penalties when he is on the pitch. And so if we weigh up all of the options in this price point between midfield and attack, assuming that I haven't really missed anyone there, I still think a rotation-prone Pedro is actually top of the pile for all of those players. Now, there's one more thing about Pedro that I should probably point out here, and that is that he played 88 minutes in game week 8 against Liverpool, which is a huge match for him to be playing in, and he got the majority of the minutes, which is a very good sign. De Zerbi wouldn't have played Pedro for that long in that fixture if he didn't think Pedro was up to such a big game. So Pedro might actually be on track to get a bit more of a successive run of starts, as he may have now proven to De Zerbi that he has learnt the system that De Zerbi wants to employ. He's doing all the right things off the ball, which was a comment that De Zerbi raised way earlier in the season, basically hinting that Pedro wasn't working hard enough off the ball. I kept a very close eye on Pedro when I owned him, and as soon as that comment came out, in the following games, you could see Pedro darting around without the ball, trying to earn the ball back. He definitely listened to De Zerbi, and he was definitely putting the effort in. And so it might have now been long enough for De Zerbi to go, yeah, I think Pedro has actually done enough to start playing a much more consistent role in that starting 11 for Brighton. Now, I'm only saying that this could be improving. It's not a definite, but it is something that we need to consider when weighing up whether or not to bring João Pedro in. So to summarize all that, in game week 10, assuming I don't get struck with any major injuries, I will be selling Julian Alvarez to buy João Pedro back into my squad in order to upgrade Mbeumo to bring Saka back in, to have a midfield of Saka, Maddison, Luis Diaz, Heung-min Son, and Salah, which is a very stacked midfield, and I am really looking forward to having that team in game week 10. Now, just quickly, the last thing that I will cover in this team selection video is the captaincy this week. I own both Haaland and Salah, have done so all season, and so captaincy, there is actually a bit of a captaincy discussion to be had this week. So, Haaland versus Salah for captaincy. Salah has been very consistent with returns, but Haaland has had more braces and hat-tricks. And with the ownership risk associated with Haaland, as he will likely be about 140% to maybe 150, 160% EO in game week 9. If Haaland does in fact hit that hat-trick this week and Salah doesn't match the hat-trick, the rank tumble will be devastating. I think both players are capable of scoring hat-tricks this week. So if Haaland is capable of scoring a hat-trick and Salah is capable of scoring a hat-trick, it's really a 50-50 shot as to who is going to get it. You could go rank chasing for Salah, but the EO for Haaland definitely needs to be a big consideration here, as I still think Haaland could score a hat-trick in this game, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if he did. And if he does and Salah doesn't, and I have Salah captain, it will be a huge rank loss. I'm only planning to go against Haaland if he has a low ceiling match, like the Arsenal fixture last week, where I went against Haaland and captain Salah for his brace. And I would only really go against Haaland if a different premium asset, so someone like a Salah, Son or Saka, also had a plum fixture with a much higher ceiling. So if the alternative captains have a lot lower ownership, it means that when the captaincy pays off, it's a huge rank gain, but you've also minimized your risk because Haaland has a low probability of growing crazy when he is playing in a low ceiling fixture, like playing in Arsenal, or maybe Haaland does have a couple of tricky fixtures coming up soon. Man United, I actually don't think this is a low ceiling fixture for Haaland. I think Man United are probably going to get battered. Chelsea and Liverpool in game weeks 12 and 13, and even Spurs in game week 14, though, are a lot lower ceiling fixtures for Haaland, and we can look to go against Haaland as the captain, as it is much, much less likely that A, Haaland's going to get a hat-trick in any of those fixtures, B, the effective ownership won't be as high, and the alternative captains in those game weeks do have very plum fixtures and could go crazy with a massive rank gain coming out of those plays as well. However, it is Haaland. He can basically score a hat-trick in any fixture. He did, in fact, score a hat-trick against Manchester United last year at Old Trafford, which still burns bright in my memory. So, Brighton isn't a low-ceiling game for Haaland, though. Brighton will admirably aim to play competitive, expansive football, which City should be able to capitalise on easily. I really only see it going bad for Haaland if Man City have an off game, which they haven't been playing as good. They're still playing good football, but they haven't been playing as good as what they have been across the season without Rodri in the squad. But Rodri is coming back and will be back in the team, which will have a huge boost. And so I do think Man City will be strengthened for this game against Brighton. But like I said, the only way I see this going bad for Haaland is if Man City have an off game and Brighton come out to being back at their beguiling best. So for me, it's Haaland captain all day because he could easily score a hat-trick and the effective ownership is there. And even though Salah could also get that hat-trick, I will still get that hat-trick in my squad without the captaincy on him, and I will be super happy with that if that is in fact the case. So that's it for today's video. If you got something out of the video, please do press the like button and consider subscribing. It really does help the channel out. And if not, that's all good too. I appreciate you watching. Cheers.